Now here's what happened. Here's what really happened in the experiment. They turned off the water. So he could have climbed all the way up and gotten the banana. But all the other apes knew what happened in the past, and so they said, all right, this ain't going to happen. They continue to do this, taking one of the original apes and replacing it with a new ape. When the new replacement came in to replace the second original ape, you know who beat up on the new ape more than anybody else? It was ape number 6. He didn't know why he was doing it, but he knew when he did it, everybody else pummeled him. He's going to pummel somebody. It eventually got to the point that when all the apes were replaced, it didn't make a difference. Nobody ever went up on the ladder because everybody knew that if you went up on the ladder, something bad would happen. And it usually was that you got to beat him. Nothing else. That's how cultures are developed in businesses. Something happens, somebody did it one time, and suddenly it becomes their tradition. I tell a story in a church setting that a woman going in to bake a roast and just tells her daughter, go get that big pan for me. So she brings this monstrous pan and puts this little roast in it. And she's done this every time she's ever cooked the roast. And her daughter says, Mom, I see you do this every time. Why do you do that? Because that's how my mom did. That's culture. That's the environment that you grow up in. And so this kind of setting of the culture of your company makes all the difference in the world. Your company is a company that is programmed to want to do what's right. You've got a good chance of being able to do what's right. The hard part is when you're in a company that doesn't have an ethical culture, that looks for ways to cut corners or skirt around the issues. You know, in my environment, where we deal with FDA, we make changes in the product and we have to make a call. Do we file with the FDA that this is a new device, or do we consider this an altered device not significant enough to notify them? It's an ethical call as to what you do. A number of years ago, it's the only product liability case we've ever had as Helena, as a company, in 40 plus years of operation. We were sued because a baby had developed brain damage because she was pulled from the mother premature because her lungs were immature. And we have a test to determine maturity of the lungs. Well, our test has been used, it's been a standard for almost as long as we've been a company. Here's what happened. The company that bought the test from us, the lab that bought the test from us, decided that there was a way to shortcut the test and modify it a little bit. And so they made it so that it would work faster, but it also wasn't accurate. We had no liability in that case, but they had all the liability. Individuals making choices make all the difference in the world as to whether or not a company is going to be ethical or not ethical. But so does the culture. And let's go on in a circle. You need to remember that your ethics are always on display. There's always somebody watching you. You think that you operate in a vacuum. If you're a manager and you think that nobody knows exactly what you're doing any minute of the day, you're fooling yourself. Somebody always knows what's going on. Somebody always has an opinion of what's going on. And you need to make sure, as an individual, whether you're an employee or an employer, whether you're a worker in a manager or supervisory position, that what you do conforms to what is right. Now we're going to talk about a few cases where trying to decide what right is can often be very, very hard. Not everything's black and white. Not everything can be simply cut down and say, well, here's what the law says, and therefore this is what we're going to do. Remember the story that I told you about the FBI. 1 year later, everybody thinking that, boy, we got away with this one. At least everybody at Helena. The only person that knew that this thing was going to blow up was the person that in Ohio that went to the FBI and said, listen, I really messed up. This is what I did. All of us thought, well, there was nothing going on here. We got a 15% discount. There's always somebody who knows something that can cause problems. You always want to be on the right side of the right. You ever want to play with the gray line? Makes you want to remember that your ethics or lack of them affect others. Remember Morton Thiokol? Does that name sound familiar to you? Challenger, rocket, that explosion. You remember what happened? An O-ring. Here was an O-ring that Morton Thiokol said, you know, this may not be safe. But they had this tremendous pressure from NASA. They did not want to be the company that said, abort the run. And so what did they do? They folded to the pressure. It's just an O-ring. It probably won't fail. It wasn't, we came to know it as a product integrity problem. It was an integrity problem. Had nothing to do with product. It was a product failure, but it was an integrity problem. A failure of a person, people, or a corporate decision, whoever made it, where an unethical decision was made. And obviously, not only was the challenge lost, but all the people that were on. There's nothing that you will do that will not have consequences. At Helena, we have the same situation. That, just the story that I shared with you about the baby, that there are inevitable consequences of things that we do or don't do. A fellow named Calvin, he's a coworker. He sees a coworker on the computer looking at something that would be inappropriate. And it's against company policy, so he's kind of in a quandary. He knows that, kind of likes Calvin. I mean, likes this guy, but he doesn't know him very well. He does know they just got married. And so he's trying to figure out what to do. The corporate policy was go and report it. So he really doesn't want to give this guy a black mark. He just got married. And so he says, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently nudge this guy. And so he goes up and says, listen, I saw you doing that yesterday. It's just not against, it's against the rules. I just want to make sure you do that. The guy took an affront to this whole thing. And he started a campaign of criticism and denigrating this fellow and doing everything that he could to make his life miserable to the point that he just didn't want to come into work anymore. His boss also participated in kind of ostracizing him, which is, I will tell you, maybe partly in the boss's defense, he was new and didn't know that Calvin was a good worker. But at the same time, as a boss, you never do that. It doesn't make a difference whether it's a bad worker or good worker. Your position is that you're neutral on everybody, encouraging and positive. So here was a guy. Did he make an ethical decision? I'm not going to ask you to answer that. Would he have been better off to go and say, listen, this guy broke the rules, here's what he did, and do the paperwork way? Or did he put himself in what he thought was kind of being the good guy? Can you see how not every decision is easy? And how whether you have ethics or lack of ethics, and it affects people? I promise you, this will be the way it is for the rest of your life in business. You're involved, you're going to be in situations just like this. Hopefully more people have effect on you because of their bad decisions than you have an effect on them because of your bad decisions. But maybe if you're lucky, you get in a country where everybody's trying to do what's right. When our kids were growing up, my wife would always tell them, remember who you are and what you represent. And we kind of had some rules, but we also tried to teach them that you needed to decide what you were going to do when you were confronted with, do I drink or do I do drugs?